Economists say mass deportations mean labor shortages.
It would devastate the agricultural economy in the United States.
Economists predict a steep rise in the cost of everything from vegetables to meat and milk.
Grocery stores pass nearly all the costs onto their consumers, and so shoppers would see another bout of food inflation. And you're talking about food inflation of 5 or 6% annually. And so you're looking at considerable economic impacts that would be considered a recession.
I'm beginning to think that when Elon Musk said back in November 2024 that Americans would have to endure temporary economic hardship, he was actually telling the truth, though he's likely wrong about how temporary it will be. This recent video published by Al Jazeera included an economist who predicts a recession caused by the labor shortages in the agricultural economy and the consequent food inflation therein from the fear instilled by Trump's new mass deportations policy and the reason behind the labor shortages for farmers. I wonder if Trump's deportations caused him to back down from his 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports for a month because it would crash the economy too abruptly. He says he'll impose the tariffs in 30 days, but maybe he'll be chicken again and they'll be forestalled. If not, the effects could exacerbate us into a depression like Hoover's mass deportations and tariffs did in the early 1930s. But before we dive in, if you enjoy this video and want to support the channel, don't forget to click the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Your support means a lot, and it also helps promote these progressive messages to the YouTube algorithm, which helps its amplification to reach even more viewers at a critical time when the right under Trump's leadership is trying to suppress its opposition. Elon Musk, an unelected private citizen from South Africa who has sworn no oath to defend the Constitution, who has just exposed the sensitive data and personally identifiable information of nearly 2 million federal employees, who has just shut down U.S. aid, which aims to counter Chinese and Russian influence, and who has circumvented Congress to access the Treasury Department's payment system, stated back in November of 2024 on X, the social media company formerly known as Twitter that he bought and conformed into his image, that Americans would have to brace for temporary economic hardship before returning to a model of growth. Elon, like most of the hyper-wealthy I presume, is naively optimistic, believing that governments run like businesses produce the best outcomes for people, no matter the current era. In my view, Trump has been deliberately recreating the economic conditions that led to the Great Depression, pushing isolationism and nationalism through trade wars to set the stage for a global conflict that would displace America from atop its position of global hegemony. This aligns perfectly with the goals of U.S. adversaries like China and Russia, who seek to accelerate America's decline through their ideological subversion parrot in Trump, just as they did during his first term, which I'm sure Elon either naively and or conveniently disclaims Trump is doing when he says the economic hardship will only be temporary, rather than the more likely case of elongated economic stagnation that historical precedents of the 1930s tell us. See what I did there? Elongated economic stagnation. Here are the historical parallels of the 1930s economic climate to today's because of Trump's Hoover-like policies. The mass deportations of Mexican workers in the 1930s, often referred to as Mexican repatriation, significantly contributed to the economic downturn during the Great Depression. Over 1.8 million people of Mexican descent, many U.S. citizens, were deported or coerced into leaving between 1929 and 1936. Key industries such as agriculture, mining, and manufacturing depended heavily on Mexican labor, and with fewer workers available, farms and factories struggled to maintain production levels, exacerbating economic stagnation. Sound familiar? The Great Plains and Midwest relied on cheap farm labor, and the deportations left many farms without enough workers. Unemployment rose among both Mexican and non-Mexican workers as entire supply chains were disrupted. The idea behind repatriation was to, quote, free up jobs, unquote, for white Americans, but instead the mass deportations reduced demand and worsened unemployment. The Great Depression did not improve as a result of deportations, and since they didn't work then, I don't think Trump's mass deportations, which are causing labor shortages to farmers, will work now either. Trump's tariffs are likely to impact the economy much as Hoover's did in the 1930s, just as his repatriation program is expected to produce effects similar to those of Hoover's Mexican repatriation program in the early 20th century. Because of Hoover's repatriation that caused mass deportations, farms lost up to 50% of their workforce, leading to wasted crops, reduced supply, and economic contraction. Farm production dropped, food prices increased, and labor shortages became widespread. Deporting workers did not free up jobs. Instead, businesses struggled to operate. The reduced labor force meant lower consumer spending, further hurting the economy. But I don't think this is why Elon said Americans would have to endure temporary economic hardship. Otherwise, he would know from these historical precedents that there will not be a rapid recovery to a healthier, sustainable economy after a, quote, initial severe overreaction in the economy, end quote, like he said on his social media platform in November of 2024. Like Hoover's Mexican repatriation program and his Smoot-Hawley tariffs, Trump's mass deportations and tariffs will have similar effects that Hoover's did, which stagnated any economic recovery until the New Deal was introduced by Hoover's presidential successor, Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt. Even if Elon was correct that Americans would have to endure economic hardship, which is barely creditable as many can predict that potentiality based on the effect that widespread labor shortages has on the economy alone, he was incorrect that it would be so short. So I'd say the far-right MAGA Republicans led by Elon and Trump, whereof neither swore an oath on a Bible to defend the Constitution, will create the very conditions through their parroted tactics of ideological subversion to destabilize the standing America has in the global order that will engender the next FDR who promotes a Green New Deal. So, I say, let's manifest it for them and for us. And as always, stay vigilant, fellow freedom fighters.